Alright guys, we're back out here in the paint shop. We're fixing to get started on the front and back fender on this Suzuki Intruder. If you hadn't seen the past 3 videos, go back and check them out. The last one I posted, I think, was Suzuki Intruder paint job part 2B. The reason it was a B was I didn't know my camera had shut off, so I hit record and ended up recording a 6-minute video, I believe. But I needed to go ahead and post that to finish up what was done yesterday. So we got 2 side panels and both gas tank covers. Base coated and clear coated. They're done and put up out of the way. We've got this front fender sitting out here right now, and we're going to get on it here momentarily. So let me get you turned around, and we'll mix up some base coat, and then we'll wipe this fender down with wax and grease remover and tack it off and base coat it. Alright, got our cup out, our gun. Just do a little side note. If you watch the video, the last video I posted, maybe the one before that, I talked about it sounded like my base coat gun, this Finex Sharp here, was sputtering a little bit, and come to find out it wasn't just my imagination. Usually when you have one sputtering, typically that means it's sucking air from somewhere it's not supposed to be sucking air. And usually, real quick, I don't want to drag this video out too long. Usually when it's pulling air from somewhere it's not supposed to be pulling air, it's usually from this packing. Right here where the needle goes through this packing nut. And a lot of times what you'll get is you'll have a drip of paint that will start coming out of this packing nut right here. And also you can have it sucking air. And so I went ahead and pulled that packing nut out and replace the packing nut. Later on, what I'll do is just do a complete rebuild of this gun. Honestly, it would be hard pressed to tell you how many paint jobs is on that gun. If I had to guess, I would say 40, maybe 40 or so paint jobs on that gun. Without rebuilding it. So it is time to rebuild it. The gun itself, it's around 14 years old or so. I've rebuilt it twice. So I suppose it's time for another rebuild. I may order a rebuild kit for it, and then we may do a video on that. But right now, we're going to mix up this base coat and go ahead and mix our paint up, and then we'll wipe our panel down with wax and grease remover. We'll put our rubber gloves on to do that. That way we don't inadvertently, after we've wiped it down, we don't inadvertently touch it with our fingers. Last thing you want is a fingerprint in your finished product, and that's what will happen. Alright, we don't need as much base coat as we mixed up yesterday, so we're going to go on about 2. Remember guys, this stuff, base coat mixes 1 to 1. So about like that. So 1 part base coat and 1 part urethane reducer. We won't lock that cap down until we're sure we got enough. Alright, let's get our urethane reducer over here. I've got the heat on in here. It's not that it's really cold outside, because it's probably in the mid-50s, I would guess. But it's still cold where paint is. Where paint comes into the equation, it is still cold outside. I'm still using the slow reducer. I haven't went and got any more. I'm just going to compensate for that by making the garage good and hot. Alright, we went 2 on the paint. Let's go 2 on the reducer. Just like so. We'll get this mixed up. We will wipe our panel down. We'll put our paint in the gun. We'll put our mask on, and then we'll tack everything off and go to shooting. I have already inspected the panel to ensure that I didn't miss anything when I wet sanded it the other day. On your sealer can go wet and wet. So what I mean is, you can spray your sealer on a panel, give it, the sufficient time to tack off, and then you can go straight on top of that with your base coat. If you're not going to do that on your sealer is usually about 8 hours. So after 8 hours, before you can go over it with your base coat or whatever you're putting on top of your sealer, you have to prep the surface of the sealer before you can put a coat over it. And basically what that means is you can use some red Scotch-Brite, and what you're wanting to do is just irritate that surface so that it accepts your next coat, and your next coat has something to stick to. So obviously this sealer is more than 8 hours old. So we have wet sanded it and got it prepared. And sometimes guys, it's like that. You just don't have time for a full paint job in one day, and you need to understand the characteristics of whatever it is you're painting. How quick you can recoat them. What has to be done if you're not within that time frame. That stuff's really important. So read your data sheet. Usually everything has a data sheet on the side of the container that it came in, and it'll tell you recoat times. It'll tell you how long you need to wait, if you have to wait, the temperatures that it needs to be shot at. All that pertinent information is right there waiting on you to read. So they expect you to read it so that the product that you bought works to their specifications. Alright, now we're going to get our sock over here that we use for wax and grease remover. We'll set this out of the way. We're going to get our wax and grease remover. And we'll wipe this thing down. I like putting, when I get through with one, I like putting the container out of the way. That way I don't mistakenly grab that, not meaning to. I'll spin you around and we'll be right back. Alright, let's turn you around where you can see. And we'll wipe this thing down real quick with our wax and grease remover. We have our gloves on. I cannot stress that enough. Don't be touching these finished panels with your bare hands. You are asking for trouble. Go over it more than once. Take your time. Nobody is in a hurry. Take your time. Make sure that you hit every part of it. Everything that gets painted has to be prepped. I know y'all get tired of me saying that, but you can't stress it enough. Automotive finishes are finicky. They're very particular. And sometimes, uh-oh, about to make a mess. Sometimes, man, it just seems like you can't mess it up. Everything is going your way, and then some days you take all the precautions in the world and it just seems like nothing is working out right. And on those days, typically, I'll call it quits for the day, because if you're not careful, frustration will set in and you'll start making some really senseless mistakes, and they can be costly to your bottom line. And bottom line, I mean your profit margin. Alright, that looks pretty good. Make sure this thing's not going to move on me. Make sure all of our lips up underneath have been prepped. I need to rotate this up this way, because I'm going to have to get up under this lip. And I don't want it to be that close to that. Alright, so we wiped everything down. Let's give our paint one more little mix. Maybe it's me, I mentioned this in the other video. This base coat just seems a little thick to me. I don't know why. But I'm going a little more than 50% reducer. I'm going probably more like about 55 to 60% reducer. Alright, let's turn our heat off. Open the window a little bit. Remember what I said on the last video. If you hadn't seen it, guys, go watch it. When you're painting black, you got to get in there and get out, because your overspray, when it lands back on your panel, will actually turn your panel gray if you're not careful. As the overspray dries in the air and lands back on your panel, it lands in a different, I don't want to say different color, I don't guess, but the overspray appears a light gray. And if you're painting something black, apparently you mean for it to be black. So if you wanted it gray, I would guess you'd be painting it gray, not black. So getting your fumes out of the air as fast as possible is tough when you are when you're painting outside of a paint booth that's not pulling the air clean for you. All right, go ahead and mix up our lacquer in our cup. Clean our cup out. Alright, set that aside. One more drip. That goes in the garbage. Put our lid on. Make sure the hole is cleaned out. And we are in good shape. Oh, it's like a ritual, guys. Get our tack cloth. Set that right there. Go ahead and get our mask on. Tacking is the very last thing that I do before I spray. It's like a ritual. I have certain ways of doing things, and they seem to have worked out pretty well so far. All right, grab our tack cloth. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright guys, I want to show you something. Apparently I touched something with my glove that I wasn't supposed to touch. So I want to show you exactly what happens. Alright. See the fingerprints? That is a no-no. I had my gloves on. Apparently maybe my face itched, or I'm not really for sure what happened. But that just goes to show you, had I not seen that, we would have been in trouble. So I'll go back over it with my wax and grease remover. Sorry about the shot, guys. Just bear with me. We'll go back over it with our wax and grease remover and straighten that out. Take your time. There's nobody in a rush. Just take your time. And I will change my gloves after I get this cleaned up. Alright, I don't know which glove it was, so we're going to change both of them. It's little details like this that make the difference between a smooth going paint job and one that fights you the whole time. Keeping everything good and clean. Alright, we're going to go back over it real quick with our tack cloth and make sure we didn't get any lint from our rag. It doesn't matter how good you are with a spray gun. Doesn't matter how smooth you can lay down the paint. If what's up under that paint is not prepared right, your paint job will not look right. That's why typically I don't step in and pick up a paint job that's halfway done. If I'm going to do a paint job, I would just soon do the paint job from front to back. I don't want my name on something that doesn't look good. Makes it hard to get more business. All right. Here we go, guys. Guys, I'm just barely pulling the trigger. Not much at all. Yeah, guys, I'm just barely pulling the trigger. Maybe about quarter trigger. Mainly, the main reason I do that is my very first coat is going to tell me whether I'm going to have any fisheye, pinholes, or anything stupid like that. So if I put a heavy first coat on and it does pinhole or it does fisheye, then I just have more of a a problem I have to deal with. If I can catch that pinhole or that fisheye early, I can dust that base coat in, and it's not so wet that it's not so wet that it flows away from that pinhole or that fisheye. And I can dust the base coat in there and get it to go ahead and fill, and then let that base coat tack up real good, and then my next coat on top of that will have something to stick to inside that pinhole or that fisheye. Now obviously if the fisheyes are too bad, then you would want to go ahead and pull all your base coat back off of that panel and get to the bottom of why you're fisheyeing. Alright, we're going to pause you right here and we'll be back. Alright guys, I've tacked it off. It's set for 7 or 8 minutes or so. It's pretty warm inside this storage building, so it tacks off pretty quick. Always make sure that everything is tacked off. You don't want to trap that reducer under another coat. It will have what's called a solvent pop. It's a lot worse in clear coat than it is base coat, because base coat tacks up so fast. But and you don't put it on as heavy. But yeah, you wanna make sure everything's good and tacked up. All right. Our panel's ready for the next coat. I don't know if you can tell by the sound of the gun, but I was pulling the trigger a whole lot more, probably about half trigger. I don't ever use full trigger. I don't care if I'm painting a whole car or a motorcycle. I don't ever use full trigger. But I don't adjust my gun for half trigger. I have my needle pulled all the way out, and it's there if I need it. But this coat, we were going for coverage, and the next coat I put on it will be about the same amount. All right, we'll let this tack up, and we'll come back, look at it, make sure the surface is still in good shape, tack it off one more time, put our last and final coat on it. We'll be back in just a minute. Alright guys, tacked up, it's been tacked off, the panel looks really good. We're ready for a third and final coat. I believe we're in really good shape. Alright, let's get at it. Let me adjust my mask a little bit. I tightened it up during the break and made it a little too tight. I'm scared to do a whole lot with it. This mask is old and it would suck to break the straps out of it right now. So I try to be careful. All right. All right, let's get at it.
Looking really good. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. Everything's got good solid coverage. All the lips are covered. No fish eyes, no pinholes, no trash. Yeah, I like that a lot. Let them tack up and we'll be ready for some clear. Be back in a minute. Alright guys, we are back. You notice a different fender sitting in here. I got both front and back fenders in. I went ahead and base coated the rear fender. So I've got my clear mixed up in the gun. I just got through tacking off the panels. And I think you can hear in the background I got a little fan blowing. See if I can blow that clear on out the door and keep it away from my camera. That way I can get you in here a little bit closer. Alright guys, let's see what's up. Alright, that's the first coat. I see a couple of little white specks. So we'll let this tack up real good, and then we'll take our tack cloth. Not really for sure where that's coming from. 3 or 4 little specks. We'll get that cleaned up, and we'll bring you back in a minute. Alright guys, tacked off. Just went over it with the tack cloth. Got most all the little white specks out of it. No, almost look like cigarette ash. Me being a smoker, I couldn't possibly tell you where that came from. But we're going to put our second coat on. This one will be slower and heavier. We're looking for 100% coverage out of this one.